7 ruthless lessons that make you mentally untouchable. Right now, someone is trying to break you, not with violence, not with obvious aggression, but with words carefully chosen to find the cracks in your armor, with behaviors designed to make you question yourself, with tactics so subtle you don't even realize you're under attack until you're already wounded. And here's the brutal truth. If you're not mentally untouchable, you're mentally vulnerable. There's no middle ground in psychological warfare. You're either the person who stands firm when others try to manipulate, or you're the person who bends, breaks, and wonders why life keeps hurting you. This isn't about becoming cold or heartless. It's about building a mind so resilient that manipulation slides off you like water off stone. It's about developing psychological armor that doesn't make you hard, but makes you impenetrable to those who would exploit your openness. Mental invincibility isn't something you're born with. It's forged through painful lessons that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. They choose comfort over strength. They choose being liked over being respected. They choose temporary peace over permanent power. And they pay for these choices with their dignity, their autonomy, and their sense of self. The 7 lessons you're about to learn are ruthless, because reality is ruthless. Psychology doesn't care about your feelings. Human nature doesn't bend to accommodate your wishes. And the people who will try to control you throughout your life certainly won't stop just because you're a good person. These lessons aren't about being mean. They're about being unbreakable. They're about understanding the game being played around you so you can stop being a pawn and start being a player who controls their own board. The uncomfortable truth is that we live in a world where psychological manipulation is everywhere. In relationships, in families, in workplaces, in social media, in advertising, in politics. Everyone is trying to influence everyone else. Some do it consciously and maliciously. Others do it unconsciously, simply repeating patterns they learned. But the effect is the same. If you don't have psychological boundaries, if you haven't internalized these ruthless lessons, you will be influenced, controlled, and directed by forces outside yourself. You'll live a life that serves others' agendas while your own dreams and needs get perpetually postponed. You'll give your time, energy, and emotional resources to people who would never reciprocate. And you'll wonder why you feel empty, exhausted, and resentful, despite trying so hard to be good, to be kind, to be everything everyone needs. The first lesson cuts deep. No one is coming to save you. Not your parents, not your partner, not your friends, not society, not karma, not justice. No one. This isn't pessimism. It's liberation disguised as abandonment. When you truly accept that you are your own first, last, and only guaranteed line of defense, something fundamental shifts in your psychology. You stop waiting. You stop hoping someone else will fix things. You stop believing that if you're just good enough, patient enough, or deserving enough, rescue will arrive. Rescue isn't coming. And that's actually the best news you'll ever receive, because it means you stop giving your power away to people who were never going to use it to help you anyway. You reclaim agency over your own life, your own protection, your own future. Most people spend decades waiting for salvation from external sources. They wait for their toxic partner to finally change and become the person they pretended to be in the beginning. They wait for their manipulative parent to suddenly see them, value them, apologize for years of harm. They wait for their exploitative boss to recognize their worth and reward their loyalty. They wait for the universe to balance the scales and deliver justice for all the wrongs they've endured. And while they wait, life passes them by. Their boundaries get violated repeatedly. Their time gets stolen consistently. Their energy gets drained systematically. All because they're waiting for someone else to value them, instead of valuing themselves enough to demand better treatment or walk away from situations that diminish them. The ruthless truth is that the moment you accept no one is coming, you become dangerous to manipulators. Because a person who knows they're on their own doesn't need approval, doesn't need validation from others to confirm their reality, doesn't need permission to protect themselves. They simply act. When a boundary is violated, they don't wait for the violator to acknowledge the violation or agree it was wrong. They enforce consequences immediately. When they're being mistreated, they don't stick around hoping the mistreatment will stop if they're patient enough. They leave. When someone shows them through repeated actions that they can't be trusted, they don't give endless chances hoping things will be different. They believe the actions and adjust their behavior accordingly. This self-reliance terrifies manipulators because it means their usual tactics don't work. Research from Stanford University on learned helplessness reveals something critical about human psychology and the development of resilience or vulnerability. When people believe they can't control outcomes, when they experience repeated situations where their actions seem to make no difference, they stop trying to control anything. They become passive, accepting, resigned to whatever happens to them. This serves manipulators perfectly because passive people are controllable people. Passive people don't fight back. They don't set boundaries. They don't leave. They just endure and hope things improve on their own. But the reverse is equally true and even more powerful. When people truly accept they're the only ones who will fight for themselves, when they understand that their safety and well-being depend entirely on their own actions, they become ferociously self-protective. Not in an angry way, not in a paranoid or defensive way, in a calm, immovable way that comes from deep certainty about their worth and their right to protect it. They stop appealing to others' better nature because they understand most people don't have one when it conflicts with their interests. They stop explaining themselves to people who've already decided to misunderstand them because the misunderstanding is strategic, not accidental. They stop seeking fairness from fundamentally unfair people who have no interest in treating them equitably. They just protect themselves and move forward. This shift from hoping for external rescue to providing your own protection is the foundation of becoming mentally untouchable. Everything else builds on this realization. The second ruthless lesson: your empathy is a weapon people will use against you. This sounds harsh. It sounds like advice that would turn you into a monster, into someone cold and unfeeling. But here's what it actually means. Empathy without boundaries is self-destruction with good intentions. Your ability to understand others' feelings, to imagine their pain, to care about their struggles is beautiful. It's one of the most valuable qualities a human can possess. It makes you capable of genuine connection, of helping others, of creating relationships based on mutual understanding and care. It's also the primary tool manipulators use to control you. They know that if they can make you feel their distress, you'll do almost anything to alleviate it, even if it destroys you, even if it violates your own boundaries, even if it requires you to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. And they will absolutely exploit this until you learn to guard your empathy like the precious resource it is. Watch how this works in practice. A manipulator does something harmful to you. They lie. They betray you. They violate a boundary you clearly set. They treat you with disrespect in front of others. You call them out. You name what they did and how it affected you. Instead of taking accountability, instead of apologizing genuinely, instead of committing to changed behavior, they immediately shift to their pain. Their difficult childhood that made them this way, their current stress at work or with finances, their mental health struggles that make normal behavior impossible, their relationship issues that overflow into all their interactions. And your empathy kicks in automatically, like a reflex you can't control. You feel their pain. You understand their context. You recognize their struggles are real. And suddenly, inexplicably, you're comforting the person who just hurt you. You're apologizing for bringing up their harmful behavior because discussing it made them feel bad. You've been redirected from addressing harm to managing their emotions. This is the empathy trap, and mentally untouchable people recognize it instantly. They can acknowledge someone's pain without taking responsibility for it. They can understand context without allowing it to excuse harm. They can have compassion for someone's struggles without sacrificing their own well-being to accommodate those struggles. This is empathy with boundaries. It sounds like, I understand you're struggling, and I'm sorry you're going through that. And my boundary about this behavior still stands. Or, I hear that your childhood was difficult. That doesn't give you permission to treat me this way. Or, simply, your reasons for hurting me don't make it hurt less. The behavior needs to stop. This isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It's refusing to participate in the empathy hijacking that manipulators depend on to avoid accountability. Dr. Ramani Durvasula, a clinical psychologist specializing in narcissistic abuse and manipulation patterns, describes this as empathy hijacking. Manipulators don't just use your empathy accidentally. They don't stumble into exploiting your compassion. They target it deliberately and strategically. They've learned through trial and error, through observing what works, that empathetic people can be controlled through emotional appeals that bypass logic entirely. So they cry when confronted. They share their trauma when held accountable. They perform vulnerability when their manipulation is named. And empathetic people, who genuinely want to help and who can't stand to see others suffer, get trapped in an endless cycle of caretaking someone who's weaponizing their care against them. Becoming mentally untouchable means you keep your empathy, but you wall it off from people who've proven they'll exploit it. You stop letting people's sob stories excuse their bad behavior. You stop believing that understanding why someone hurts you means you have to accept being hurt. You develop the ability to hold two truths simultaneously. This person has suffered, and this person is choosing to make me suffer. Both can be true. Their pain can be real, and their behavior can still be unacceptable. Your empathy for their situation doesn't obligate you to tolerate mistreatment. This boundary around empathy is what allows you to remain compassionate without being exploitable, caring without being controllable. The third lesson is perhaps the most difficult to internalize because it challenges some of your deepest assumptions about the people closest to you. Most people don't want you to grow beyond them. They want you to stay small, manageable, and non-threatening to their ego and their comfort. This includes family. This includes friends. This includes partners. This includes people who claim to love you deeply and want what's best for you. Because when you grow, when you develop boundaries, when you become mentally untouchable and start living according to your own values rather than their expectations, you stop being easy to control. You stop accepting mistreatment. You stop playing roles that serve others at your expense. And this threatens people who benefited from your smallness, from your willingness to sacrifice yourself for their comfort. This phenomenon appears everywhere once you recognize it and start looking for the pattern. The parent who gets angry when their adult child sets boundaries, claiming the boundaries are disrespectful when they're really just inconvenient to the parent's ability to control. The partner who sulks when you start prioritizing your own goals and development, accusing you of being selfish when you're really just becoming whole instead of half a person. The friend who stops calling when you're no longer available to absorb their problems without reciprocation, saying you've changed when you've simply stopped accepting one-sided relationships. The colleague who undermines you when you start succeeding, framing it as concern for you when it's really jealousy about their own stagnation. These people don't necessarily want you to fail entirely. They just want you to fail to surpass them. Your smallness makes them feel bigger. Your growth makes them feel threatened and inadequate. Psychologists call this tall poppy syndrome, the social phenomenon where people feel compelled to attack, resent, or cut down anyone who rises above the group norm through success or achievement. Research published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology demonstrates that people feel threatened by others' success, particularly when that success highlights their own stagnation or lack of progress. We like to believe that people who love us want us to succeed and thrive, and some do, but many don't, especially when your success makes them look at their own lives and feel uncomfortable about what they see there. Your growth becomes a mirror that reflects their lack of growth, and instead of using that reflection as motivation, they try to shatter the mirror by pulling you back down. Becoming mentally untouchable means accepting that your growth will trigger insecurity in people who aren't growing, and you cannot sacrifice your development to maintain their comfort. You cannot stay small to keep others from feeling threatened by your expansion. You cannot dim your light because others refuse to turn on their own. This doesn't mean you celebrate making others uncomfortable, or that you grow specifically to threaten people. It means you accept discomfort in others as an inevitable side effect of your own development. And you pay that price anyway, because your growth is more important than their comfort with your stagnation. The people who truly love you will celebrate your growth even when it challenges them. The people who don't will punish you for it. And their response tells you everything you need to know about whether they deserve continued access to your life. The fourth ruthless lesson. Forgiveness without consequences is permission to repeat the harm. Society pushes forgiveness as a moral virtue without discussing its psychological dangers or the ways it can be weaponized against the person doing the forgiving. Forgive and forget. Let it go. Move on. Be the bigger person. Don't hold grudges. And these can be healthy responses to minor slights or genuine mistakes from people who show authentic remorse and change behavior. But manipulators have learned to weaponize forgiveness culture. They harm you deliberately or through reckless disregard for your well-being, offer a superficial apology designed to appease rather than repair, and expect immediate forgiveness with zero consequences. And if you don't give it, they paint you as bitter, resentful, unable to move on, or not evolved enough to practice forgiveness. This is manipulation through moral expectation. And mentally untouchable people don't fall for it. Real forgiveness, healthy forgiveness that doesn't damage the person doing the forgiving, includes boundaries and consequences. It means you release the emotional poison of resentment for your own peace and mental health, but you don't restore access to someone who's proven they'll misuse it. You can forgive someone and still block their number permanently. You can forgive someone and still refuse to be alone with them ever again. You can forgive someone and still share with others what they did, so those people can protect themselves from similar harm. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean pretending harm didn't happen or minimizing its impact. It doesn't mean giving someone another opportunity to hurt you in the same way. It means you process the betrayal, extract whatever lesson it contains, and move forward with new boundaries specifically designed to prevent repetition of that harm. This is forgiveness with self-respect intact. Studies on trust repair in relationships show that genuine reconciliation, the kind that leads to restored relationships, requires 4 essential elements: acknowledgement of the specific harm caused, genuine remorse that demonstrates understanding of the impact, changed behavior maintained consistently over time, and rebuilding trust through demonstrated trustworthiness in small things before large things. Most manipulators offer none of these elements. They offer excuses that minimize what they did. They offer deflection that shifts focus to your reaction rather than their action. They offer minimization that suggests you're making too big a deal of it. They offer promises of change that never materialize into actual changed behavior. Mentally untouchable people understand that accepting this performance as real forgiveness isn't kindness or spiritual maturity. It's self-betrayal. It's teaching someone that harming you has no real consequences, which guarantees they'll do it again, because why wouldn't they? You've proven you'll accept it. When someone shows you who they are through harmful actions, believe them the first time. And when they refuse to do the work of genuine repair, when they want forgiveness without accountability, when they demand trust without rebuilding it, accept that forgiveness in this context means letting go of your anger while also letting go of them. You release them from your emotional space. You stop ruminating on what they did. You stop waiting for them to acknowledge the harm or make it right. But you also remove them from your life or severely restrict their access. Because forgiveness doesn't mean continued exposure to someone who's proven they'll hurt you. This distinction between emotional forgiveness and relational reconciliation is critical. You can do the first without the second, and often you should. The 5th lesson requires accepting something uncomfortable that goes against years of social conditioning. You cannot reason with unreasonable people. This seems obvious when stated plainly. Of course you can't reason with unreasonable people. That's what makes them unreasonable. But in practice, most people waste years, sometimes decades, trying to make irrational people see reason. They explain patiently. They provide evidence carefully. They appeal to logic and fairness. They try different approaches and different framings. They believe that if they could just find the right words, the right argument, the right way of presenting the truth, the unreasonable person would suddenly become reasonable. This is magical thinking. It's believing you can fix something that isn't actually broken, just malicious or self-serving. And it keeps you trapped in exhausting cycles with people who have no intention of understanding you, because misunderstanding you serves their purposes. Here's what's really happening when you try to reason with someone who's being deliberately unreasonable. You're not in a good faith discussion where both parties are seeking truth, resolution, or mutual understanding. You're in a power struggle where they're using your desire for mutual understanding against you as a weapon. Every time you explain yourself, you're giving them detailed information about your vulnerabilities, your values, your pressure points, your reasoning process. Every time you try a new approach, you're teaching them what doesn't work on you, so they can defend against it or find workarounds. You're essentially giving a strategic opponent detailed intelligence about your tactics, your weaknesses, and your boundaries. while they pretend to be a confused friend who just needs more information. This is why explaining yourself to manipulators always fails and always leaves you feeling drained and frustrated. They don't need more explanation. They need you to stop setting boundaries, and confusion is a tactic to wear you down until you give up. Dr. George Simon, an expert on manipulative personalities and author of In Sheep's Clothing, explains that manipulators often understand you perfectly well. They're not confused about your boundaries or struggling to comprehend them. They're opposed to them. They understand exactly why their behavior hurts you. They don't care enough to change it. When you waste energy explaining obvious things to people who pretend not to understand, when you keep trying to make clear things clearer, you're being manipulated through a tactic called playing dumb. They make you feel like you need to explain things more clearly, more patiently, more thoroughly, in simpler language, from different angles. And while you're exhausting yourself trying to achieve understanding that will never come, they're simply waiting for you to tire yourself out and give in to what they want. They're running out the clock on your resistance. Mentally untouchable people recognize this game immediately and refuse to play it. They state their boundary once, clearly and simply. If it's not respected, they don't explain it again. They don't justify it. They don't engage in circular arguments with people who are arguing in bad faith. They simply enforce consequences. The boundary was crossed, so the consequence happens. No discussion, no negotiation, no endless processing of why the boundary exists or whether it's fair. Reasonable people understand boundaries the first time. Unreasonable people will never understand them, no matter how many times you explain. So you stop explaining and start enforcing. This saves enormous amounts of energy and makes you far less vulnerable to manipulation through fake confusion. The sixth ruthless lesson strikes at the heart of social conditioning that damages people from childhood. Being liked is not the same as being respected, and chasing likability will cost you respect every time. Society, especially for women but increasingly for everyone regardless of gender, pushes likability as a primary virtue from early childhood. Be nice, be agreeable, don't make waves, don't be difficult, smile, accommodate, put others first, consider others' feelings before your own. And these behaviors do make you liked in the short term. People enjoy those who make their lives easier, who don't challenge them, who absorb inconvenience without complaint, who go along with whatever the group wants. But this likability comes at a devastating cost. Loss of self-respect and loss of others' respect. Because people don't respect those who won't stand up for themselves. They exploit them. They take advantage of them, and they feel justified doing so. Watch how this dynamic unfolds in relationships, families, and workplaces. The person who's always agreeable, always accommodating, always putting others first and their own needs last, gets walked over constantly. They get assigned extra work because they won't say no, and the person assigning knows this. They get treated casually and sometimes cruelly by partners who know they'll never leave, no matter how badly they're treated. They get disregarded by family members who know they'll accept any treatment without consequences, because keeping peace is more important to them than demanding respect. And when they finally, inevitably reach a breaking point after years of accumulating resentment and try to set a boundary, everyone reacts with shock and anger. You've changed. You're being selfish. This isn't like you. What happened to you? Translation: you're not being as easy to exploit anymore, and we don't like it. We liked you better when you absorbed our bad behavior without complaint. This is the price of choosing likability over respect for too long. You become someone people use, not someone people value. Research on social influence and power dynamics demonstrates conclusively that respect is earned through consistency, clear boundaries, and willingness to accept social consequences for maintaining your standards. Dr. Robert Cialdini's extensive work on persuasion and influence shows that people who are easily swayed, who change their positions frequently to accommodate others, who prioritize agreement over authenticity, are perceived as weak and therefore less worthy of respect or serious consideration. Meanwhile, people who state positions clearly and hold them firmly, even when it creates conflict or social discomfort, are perceived as strong and therefore command respect even from those who disagree with them. This doesn't mean being rigid or refusing to compromise reasonably on things that don't matter. It means having core principles you won't violate for social approval, and consistently enforcing boundaries that protect those principles. Mentally untouchable people would rather be respected by a few than liked by many, because respect means people treat you well consistently. Likability often means people treat you well only when it's convenient for them, when you're serving their needs, when you're making their lives easier. The moment you stop being useful or start having needs of your own, the likability evaporates, and you discover it was never based on who you are, but on what you provide. Respect, earned through boundaries and consistency, persists even when you're not actively serving someone. It's based on recognition of your inherent worth, not your utility. This shift from seeking to be liked to demanding to be respected changes everything about how you show up in the world and how the world responds to you. The seventh and final lesson is perhaps the hardest to accept, because it requires giving up something most people desperately cling to. You must become comfortable with being misunderstood. Most people will never understand your boundaries, your decisions, or your journey, because they're not living your life. They're not in your head. They're not dealing with what you're dealing with. They're viewing your choices through the lens of their own fears, limitations, values, and agendas, and they will judge you accordingly. They'll call you cold when you're setting healthy boundaries. They'll call you selfish when you're practicing basic self-care. They'll call you difficult when you're refusing to be exploited. They'll call you crazy when you're accurately identifying manipulation. And none of these judgments are really about you. They're about the judges revealing what they value, what they fear, what they would or wouldn't do in their own lives. Becoming mentally untouchable means you stop trying to make everyone understand. You accept that being misunderstood is the price of being yourself, of living according to your own values, rather than others' expectations. This lesson becomes critical when leaving toxic relationships, changing life directions that others don't support, or implementing boundaries with family members who've had unrestricted access to you for years. People will have opinions. They'll question your decisions openly or behind your back. They'll share those questions with others, creating narratives about you that you don't control and that may bear little resemblance to reality. And the old version of you, the one who wasn't mentally untouchable, would exhaust yourself trying to correct these narratives. Explaining your reasons to anyone who would listen. Defending your choices against criticism. Seeking validation for decisions you've already made and are committed to. Trying to get everyone on board before you feel permitted to move forward with your own life. But here's what changes when you become untouchable. You stop caring if they understand. Not in an angry, defensive, or defiant way, in a peaceful, settled way that comes from deep certainty about your path. You know your reasons. You know your truth. You know what you've experienced and why you're making the choices you're making. And you recognize that people who truly care about you, who truly respect you, will trust your judgment, even when they don't have all the information or wouldn't make the same choice themselves. They'll support you because they trust that you know your own life better than they do. Meanwhile, people who don't respect you, who benefit from controlling you, or who judge others to avoid examining their own lives, will find reasons to criticize, regardless of how much you explain. You could write them a 1,000-page document detailing every reason for your decision, with footnotes and citations and expert testimonials, and they'd find fault with it. Because their criticism was never about insufficient information. It was about their discomfort with your autonomy, your growth, your refusal to remain controllable. Psychologist Dr. Harriet Breaker, author of The Disease to Please, identifies the need for universal understanding and approval as a core vulnerability that manipulators exploit ruthlessly to maintain control. When you need everyone to understand and approve of your choices, you give everyone veto power over your life. You cannot make difficult but necessary decisions if you're waiting for consensus. You cannot leave toxic situations if you're waiting for the toxic person to agree you should leave. You cannot establish boundaries if you're waiting for boundary violators to validate those boundaries as reasonable. Mentally untouchable people make decisions based on their own assessment of what's right for their life. Implement those decisions firmly and immediately, and allow others to feel however they feel about it, without changing course. The opinions of people who aren't living with the consequences of your choices are irrelevant data points. Interesting perhaps, but ultimately meaningless to your actual life. These 7 lessons create a psychological fortress that manipulation cannot penetrate. Not because you've become hard or unfeeling or closed off to human connection, but because you've become clear. Clear about your value as a human being. Clear about your boundaries and your willingness to enforce them. Clear about what you will and won't accept from others. Clear about the fact that you're the only person responsible for protecting yourself and your well-being. This clarity is what makes you untouchable. Manipulators rely on confusion, on your empathy overwhelming your judgment, on your need for approval overriding your need for safety, on your desire to be understood and liked, making you bend and compromise until you've compromised yourself into nothing. When you're no longer confused about who you are and what you deserve, when your empathy has firm boundaries, when you don't need approval from people who don't respect you, when you're comfortable being misunderstood, manipulation simply doesn't work anymore. You see it clearly. You name it accurately. You walk away from it without hesitation. And you do all of this without anger, without explanation, without seeking permission or understanding from anyone. The transformation from mentally vulnerable to mentally untouchable isn't comfortable. It requires you to disappoint people who expected you to remain controllable. It requires you to be called names by those who benefited from your weakness and resent your strength. It requires you to walk alone sometimes, because not everyone can come with you to healthier places, and some people will actively resist your journey. It requires you to grieve the loss of relationships that couldn't survive your growth, that were based on your willingness to sacrifice yourself. But here's what you gain in exchange for that discomfort: yourself, your peace, your power, your time, your energy, your dignity, your self-respect. You gain a life where people treat you well, not because you're performing for them, not because you're useful to them, but because you've made mistreatment too expensive to continue. You gain relationships based on mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. You gain the ability to sleep at night, knowing you're not betraying yourself to maintain connections with people who never truly valued you for who you actually are. If you recognized yourself in this video, If you've been mentally vulnerable and you're ready to become untouchable, understand that this isn't about one dramatic decision. It's about 1,000 small choices made consistently over time. It's choosing your boundary over their comfort every single time. Your reality over their narrative every single time. Your assessment over their judgment every single time. Your peace over their approval every single time. Without exception, without apology, without lengthy explanation. This consistency is what builds the fortress stone by stone. Each time you enforce a boundary without apologizing for it, you add a stone. Each time you refuse to explain yourself to someone who's arguing in bad faith, you add a stone. Each time you choose self-respect over likability, you add a stone. Each time you walk away from manipulation instead of engaging with it, you add a stone. And eventually, after enough consistent choices, the fortress is complete. You're still you, still capable of love, connection, vulnerability, and empathy. But now you're protected. Now you're untouchable. Now manipulation slides off you because you've removed all the hooks it used to catch on. If this resonated with you deeply, share it with someone who needs to hear these ruthless lessons. Someone who's been sacrificing themselves for people who don't appreciate it. Someone who's been waiting for rescue that isn't coming. Someone who's ready to become mentally untouchable. Because the world needs more people who can't be manipulated. More people who know their worth and refuse to accept less than they deserve. More people who protect their peace without apology or guilt. Be one of them. Join that rare group of people who've decided they matter, who've built their fortress, who've become untouchable. The world will adjust to your boundaries. People will learn to respect you. And those who won't will remove themselves from your life, which is the greatest gift they can give you. In the next video, we'll explore the specific tactics manipulators use when they encounter mentally untouchable people who won't be controlled, and how to recognize when someone is testing your new boundaries to find weaknesses. We'll discuss the extinction burst when manipulators escalate before giving up. The guilt trip escalation when simple guilt doesn't work anymore. And the smear campaign when they can't control you directly, so they try to control how others see you. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Because becoming untouchable is step one. Maintaining it against people who want you vulnerable again, who miss having access to exploit you, is step two. Your fortress starts here. Your protection starts now. Your untouchable era begins with these 7 ruthless lessons. Remember them. Practice them daily in small ways. Become them so completely that they're no longer lessons you're learning, but truths you're living. This is how you become mentally untouchable. This is how you reclaim yourself.